obelisk up in front of us. And this obelisk, what makes it so unique, in fact, is that it's the only one built outside of Rome. And they used to use it, in fact there were two of them, and they used to have them outside of town. And the Romans used these for their chariot races. And when they built up the town hall, which we see in front of us, you can see that we have, yet again, you can see this cone-shaped dome for the clock tower. And this dates back to the 14th century, and they built the whole town hall up around this clock tower. And when they came out, they wanted something grandiose to look at, and of course they decided to move this obelisk into town and make it into sort of like a fountain, because it was Louis XIV's time. And they wanted, in fact, to exaggerate the staircase which was in this town hall, and they wanted to make a fantastic ceiling. And actually what happened was, so nobody could design the ceiling, so they put it out as a competition, and it was Louis XIV's personal architect who designed the ceiling for the town hall, which we're going to have a look at later. But have a look at the taipan up here. Can you see the sun, the clouds around it? That always tells you it was Louis XIV, the Sun King, it was his time that it was built. And then you can see the Republic Française underneath with the two cherubs. 50% of this money comes from the Minister of Culture. 20% comes from the region, and the department of the county, 25% money, 25% is coming from the county, and only 5% is coming from the actual town of Arles. And this is what's paying for all the work here. And then as we go round, we'll be able to see, but it's amazing, it's just been restored, and you can still see sort of plants growing out of the used stone. It's just amazing how quickly. And this is how it will all look. They've just been replacing perhaps some of the stone, but they've been cleaning it and restoring it. And this amphitheatre has 60 arches. And if you can imagine, it would have another row, it would have had another 15 or 20 foot on top of this amphitheatre as the attic level. And they used to call it, they had two amphitheatres, one in the town of Nîmes, and the one in the town of Nîmes, in fact, was aquatic. And they could flood it out, and they had their mock naval battles. And this one was just for the gladiators, and if you can imagine, a lot of these fights were rather uneven, because a gladiator wouldn't cost as much as a footballer today. And but they used to do it because if you can imagine the population, 65% of the population in Arles were slaves, 35% were Roman citizens. So how do you keep this population down? How do you keep them quiet?
Bread and circuses.
That's right. You're absolutely right. Manger boire, we call it to eat and drink. That's probably the French have changed it. But anyway, they used to do this, and every month they would hold on something that in the amphitheatre. And they would also have the seating arrangement so that it went up in rank. You had the most important officials, the council officials, then you would have the priests, and then you would have the centurions, decurions, then right up on the attic level you had loose women. And in fact, this was a day where you went out and did everything. You got rid of all your inhibitions, and then for the next month the populace was quiet until the next event. And well, that's what they say. Anyway, so this is exactly what happened. And then after that, when it just became forgotten about, and then in 1826 when they actually restored it, and they did plays and theatre. I mean, this is where Bizet actually first produced the Arlesian suite. It was in the theatre here. It was part of this Philibrège movement, or the Provençal language. And then, strangely enough, after that, this amphitheatre is now just used for bullfighting. And the reason they have so much bullfighting in this area is Napoleon III married a Spanish wife. He spent a lot of time down here, and his wife went out and looked at the Camargue bulls around here and thought they were really ugly creatures compared to the Spanish bulls. And so Napoleon III brought her up a herd as a present. But not only did he bring up this herd of Spanish bulls, which are about 500 pounds heavier, but he brought up the Spanish bullfight. And so this is how it all started off. And this is the actual Roman theatre, and this was the first building that they built, and this comes down to about 19 BC. And they always built it for 1/3 of the town. And this is how we know it. It was built for 12,000 people. So we know at the time it was roughly 36,000 who lived in Arles. And the population probably grew. It probably grew to about 45,000 eventually. It's a big important town. And this theatre here, you see you have the front columns here. And these columns, this wall would have gone right up at the front, another 20 foot. Not only that, all these seats at the back, half coming, thank you, all these seats at the back would have been as high as the front wall. And then on the top of this, you would have had sort of wooden branches that came out, wooden spikes. And on these sort of wooden branches, you would have had this material, a heavy linen material they called vellum. And they would pull this across, and this meant that everybody sat in the shade. Because of course you couldn't have those spectacles at night, they didn't have lighting equipment. And it was quite, so they pulled this vellum across so everybody was in the shade. And then these two columns here, which they call the two widows, and one of the reasons why is because they used this during the time of the revolution for hanging people on. But it was the centres to the doors, and they had sort of three doors going onto the stage. These doors, in fact, were sort of hollowed out and had struts down the front. And all the actors were male. They had long masks here, and when they went on stage and they had to give a long speech, they would project their voices into these doors, which would give them more bass, more resounding. The sound was then thrown back out, and underneath every one of these stone seats at the front they had a little wooden box with holes. This would capture the sound. The sound couldn't escape because of the vellum as well. So it really kept the sound in, and you can drop a little stone in the centre and you can hear it right up at the top. It was amazing how they actually caught the sound. I mean, today, we've got voice boxes, all the rest of it, but they can speak to 12,000 people in a whisper. Incredibly important town. We have to go right back to about 140, 150 BC, where we had northern hordes which came down from Denmark, Norway, the sort of northern parts of Germany, because there was a mini ice age which was happening, and these people couldn't live, so they worked their way down south, and they eventually got down to behind the town of Marseille, and the Greeks decided not to call in their armies but to call in the Romans, and the Romans had had an eye on France for a long time. They beat these northern hordes, and instead of going back to Rome they decided to settle themselves here, and can you imagine, out of all the places in France, they chose this little place here, Arles. This is the high spot. The whole of this area is surrounded by marshes. If you've got marshes, you've got mosquitoes. So, you know, I could never sort of find out exactly why they wanted it. Not only that, it was close to the Rhone, perhaps this was the reason. But the first thing they did, that they built from the Mediterranean, and I don't know if any of you arrived from Marseille, you saw a fosse, it's called the Fosse Channel, which comes down from the sea and it comes to join the Mediterranean, to join the Rhone. And the reason they built this is because the Rhone for 5 months of the year is unnavigable. This meant that Arles was a port 12 months of the year. So, and the next thing they did was they built 2 aqueducts bringing in fresh water into Arles. They built a theatre, they built the amphitheatre, they built Roman baths with another aqueduct. Their houses were of extreme luxury. They had underground central heating. They had hot and cold running water. And it was the port for everything. You could find everything from the Mediterranean could be found at Arles. Unfortunately, all this was destroyed with the civilization from the other barbarians, where we had the Visigoths, the Huns, which came down and wiped it out. But the only reason that Arles was survived was because we have to go right back to the beginning of the 3rd century. They had the first bishop here, it was called Trophime. And when he died, they put him down in a stone sarcophagus on the outside of Arles, on the Domitian Way, and all these miracles began to happen. And so everybody decided they wanted to be buried in this town, in this Arles they call it, and it became so big. Can you imagine, 1.5 miles long, these stone sarcophagus were 3 high, and there were alleyways on it. And it was 77 generations, and it even came down to the point they would put down the wooden coffins in the Rhone. They would have a bridge, a low sort of bridge where they could drag the coffins in from the side. They'd open the coffins up, and in the mouths of the people would be the cash, how much to build the stone sarcophagus, and the papers. And this went on. I mean, this is why it became so big and so important. And it was the church that took over from Arles, and it became very important right up until we're coming at the end of the 11th century, where they built a cathedral to Trophime. they put Trophine into the cathedral, and then nobody particularly wanted to go down to the Arles once this was finished. And but after that, there's still the church that ran Arles, and then in the end of the 15th century, the Provence came back to being part of France, and Arles got totally forgotten about. And it wasn't remembered until we come up to 1826, where they started excavating their Roman ruins. And it wasn't until 10 years after the Vincent died that people came down here looking for his paintings. And they even found one of his paintings holding in the chickens. It was a daughter chicken run. You know, by the time they cleaned it up. So, and put Arles back on the map, and then it became, in the 1960s, it became the rice capital of the whole of Arles. And today, it's #1 capital for artistic photography. So it has all these things to go by, Arles. It's an extraordinary place.